everyone. Tonight, we are going to meet and interact with one of our guest artists, and his name is Pedja Mužijević. And Pedja and I have known each other for 3 decades. We were students together at Juilliard, had similar mentors, and we were joking in preparation for tonight that we started a conversation 30 years ago that has continued nonstop, and we're delighted that you're going to be part of it. So for those of you who don't know Pedja, Pedja has, I think, one of the most fascinating and compelling careers of any artist of his generation. As a pianist, not only on the modern piano, but on historic instruments, he has been led by his curiosity, and that curiosity has led him to a career that not only encompasses the standard appearances in front of orchestras like the Atlanta Symphony, the Milwaukee Symphony, the Dresden Philharmonic, New Jersey Symphony, many others playing concertos. But I think more interestingly, Pedja has been concentrated on the concert experience and how to expand as audience members, our delight, our engagement with live music through a variety of different kinds of concert formats. And so he's worked with very important dancers, chamber ensembles, lighting designers, musicians from all around the world, and it's also led him to really take leadership roles in a couple of organizations, including our great partner, the Baryshnikov Art Center, and Tip and Rise. And so Pedja's creativity, his musicianship, his incredible wit, his great cooking, all of these things have endeared us to many of him. And so Pedja, if I could ask you to join me on the screen, we'll begin our conversation.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a dramatic entrance, the best I could do today.
So Pedja, you were part of our Bach Festival last year, our inaugural Bach Festival, with a program that was called Bachtails, in which you interspersed works by Bach with contemporary works, and it was a fantastic, sold out, fantastic program. The program this year was a different kind of intergenerational dialogue, and maybe you can talk about what you had planned for us for this year.
So these days, if you say Bach to music lovers, that means Johann Sebastian Bach, and rightly so, one of our great masters. But Bach came from a great dynasty of musicians, and he also left a further dynasty because many of his 20 children, well, basically all of them, went into composing because it's so profitable. And few of them really made a career out of it. And I guess it was Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach that first I stumbled on, sometimes in the 90s. And then I looked into Wilhelm Friedman Bach, and then I looked at John Christian, or the London Bach, the one who moved to London. And so when Jim asked me to do another program, I thought it would be nice to do a Bach family album, and to do kind of a portrait of 3. I chose 3: Johann Sebastian, Carl Philipp, and Wilhelm Friedman. So that was the idea.
And in fact, that is one of the themes. And those of you on the call today who've been on more of these, you've known that the sons of Bach, Bach's children, have been a major theme, and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach being one of them because of the musical offering. I think that people joke that when you look back in time, you might think of a composer like C.P.E. Bach as being transitional, as it were, but at the time they didn't think they were. At the time they knew they were at the cutting edge. And why do you think it is that we don't know C.P.E. Bach's music as well as maybe it's warranted?
For starters, just to elaborate on the previous, there's a famous statement from a letter that Mozart writes to one of his patrons, and he says, Bach is the father and we are but the children. But he's speaking of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and not of Johann Sebastian Bach. Mm-hmm. So he was, I think there are trends that come and go. I mean, I'm always amazed how when I was a young lad, orchestras played Franck Symphony. You don't hear Franck Symphony now at all. So I think there is some of that things. But in C.P. Bach's case, there's another interesting thing, and I, as a passionate mystery and thriller consumer, So in 1989, with the fall of the wall, the Berlin Wall, there was a sort of a soft-ish message from former Soviet Union saying that, well, indeed, they do have a couple of boxes of manuscripts that they collected in Berlin in 1945 from the Berlin Singakademie, which is where Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach lived. And so, because there was this hole in his output, there was quite a bit of stuff missing. So, and it's interesting because there was a presence of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach music in Russia over even as recently as Mikhail Pletnev has a recording of C.P. Bach. So they had access to certain music there that they played dumb to the rest of us and said, we don't know, we never heard of that. So then this I'm not entirely sure, but let's, for the sake of tonight's webinar, say that it was purchased by Harvard, but somebody purchased it. And then little by little, the Packard Humanities Foundation has been publishing the complete works of C.P. Bach online for free. So I did a lot of research, which is an incredible resource for us to be able to, at your fingertips to, this is a man who wrote hundreds of keyboard works and symphonies and concertos, and it's a huge output. So it's been really interesting to get into that.
And so, you had to make some choices. There's so many pieces available. When you were thinking about how to program CPE with his brother and with his father, were you trying to find things that contrasted? Were you trying to find things that fit together as part of a puzzle? What drew you to the works that you chose?
Well, just like when you cook, you think of the first thing and the last thing. So there was just the sort of me as the entertainer, for the lack of better word. I wanted to create an experience that started with something that said, hello, hi everybody. And so, but then I did sort of semi-consciously, though not from the very beginning, but somewhere along the process of thinking about the program, I did think that, as every good parent, Johann Sebastian should take a backseat and let his children shine. So he, relatively speaking, was represented by a very short bit. And it was a bit that I had never heard before. I'd known of it, and so I was curious to learn something new, and we could talk about it. It was these two duets. So, and then in the case of Wilhelm Friedman Bach, his output is so much smaller. And to me, this fantasy that I've actually played for quite some time is a fascinating piece. And so I definitely wanted that. And that is actually, that in the original program, that was the longest piece of about 13 or 14 minutes. And so, it was like architecture. I started with these sort of things, and then I added things, a little thyme, a little oregano, and we ended up with the dinner.
and part of the way you present these concerts is always with spoken word. And you always have comments to make before and during. Can you talk to us in terms of concert format? How important do you think it is, especially for contemporary audiences, to hear from the performer, to hear his thoughts or her thoughts, and why do you do it?
Well, I do think it depends also on the setting. In a setting like yours at Carey Hall or ours at Bershnikov Art Center, which are intimate and salon-like, to me, it makes perfect sense because you're basically welcoming people in your salon. If I was to walk on stage at Carnegie Hall, I probably wouldn't speak. So I don't think one size fits all. I think in different occasions, I behave differently. But I do think that it is nice to speak about music. But I do try to speak about music in a way that anybody can understand. And I try to only set the stage. It's really interesting. It's very easy to fall into the trap of saying that this is a masterpiece and this is a piece I really love, as opposed to the other piece which I really hate, but I'm still playing. So it's very easy to fall into these little traps that we've all fallen into, because that's what the traps are for. So I tried to set the stage historically, like where people were, give something like in C.P. Bach's case. It's fascinating. He lived and worked for Frederick the Great, who is of course a historical figure that a lot of us have some recognition of. So that's something. So I I do think it's wonderful to establish a contact in this way as well, and not just playing.
Yeah.
So I do like it.
You know, there's one person on this call who has said to me a number of times when I speak about music before an audience, they say, don't say major and minor.
Yeah.
No one knows what that means.
Yeah.
And or even if you do, it's like the least important detail.
Right.
It's
so it's so true, and it's obviously part of our life, and it's very hard to divorce yourself from all this terminology. But I also direct a residency at BAM Center called Concert in the 21st Century, where I basically, challenge all of us to think about what is a concert and how can concert be more relevant. And I do a similar thing at Verbier Festival in Switzerland. And I do always say to students, no keys, no first theme, no second theme. And I keep saying that's like saying that Martina Navratilova has great legs. That's not why she's a great tennis player.
Right.
She's a great tennis player for many other things, her mind and coordination, all that. So these are just mechanics that really they're not necessary.
So I'm glad you mentioned your program at Banff and the work you do at Verbier, and this phrase that you said, which meant one thing in December and means another thing today, which is the concert experience in the 21st century. So, when you were last at Banff, I don't know when that was, but I'm sure it was, we couldn't have imagined that we would be having the kinds of experiences and presenting music online the way that we are. And so from your vantage point of someone who's been pushing the envelope for really decades on this question, what do you make of this time? What do you make of what we're doing? And how do we navigate through it so that the audience is engaged for the long haul?
It's so fascinating, and I'm by nature, and I don't know if that's an optimist, but just I whatever the situation is, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's make the best of it. Mm-hmm. So actually, the Banff residency was right before I was there, all of February, and it was when we got into this situation, in mid-March. At first, obviously, you're just sort of numb for a while, but then I started thinking, I really question everything about the concert. I question where it is, when it is, how long it is, what is the program, what is the atmosphere, all of it. One thing I never questioned was the presence of the audience. And that really hit me hard. I have to say, it truly, and I mean viscerally, hit me hard. I thought, this is depressing. So, but at the same time, I can't help but notice how it's been interesting. The price is obviously very high, but it's been interesting to see these kinds of gatherings, which we wouldn't have at Carey Hall.
Right.
So, and the other thing that I more and more think, music is my life, but at the same time, I think what we really, really do is we gather people. Mm-hmm. And music is the reason, and it's the content, and it's divine, and it's fabulous. But our greatest strength as an art form is gathering people and throwing people together in the room who don't know each other. And so, we'll do it again. But it to me, it kind of focused it. I would have never thought of it that way had we just gone on. So it's always a challenge and a treat to look at something with such focus. Otherwise, I'd be running out of 7 directions. So that's been amazing. But and look, I did 3 films in my apartment. The learning curve, I started from zero. I knew nothing. The first camera I ever had was my first iPhone. And I think in first two iPhones, I never clicked on it. Mm-hmm. So I still don't have a camera. I had no mic. So I learned a lot. And again, just like in other situations, I thought, okay, how can I make this different? It's not a concert. I'm not going to pretend it's a concert. So my first stream, I treated the camera as an audience member, and I moved the audience member around and I talked. I said, welcome, you're in my place. So, but I feel like we need and should do that in every situation. because Caramore is not like Carnegie.
Right.
So why not be slightly different? So anyway, so those are like interesting ruminations that come around. But yeah, it's been really, and then also I feel like I've also seen a lot of things because I don't have to decide, oh, am I going to go to Roulette in Brooklyn or to Carnegie or to 92nd Street Y or to the Kitchen or whatever. So it's been kind of amazing. Do I miss going out? Yes, very much so. But whatever, I'll make the best of whatever there is.
You know, as you're talking, it reminds me of the many late night phone calls that you and I had back in March and April as we were working through sort of this feeling of this new world that we were in. And, you know, we talked about this change in attendance behavior. If you're going to go to a concert at Carnegie Hall, if you're going to go to a concert at Burschenkopf Art Center, you have to get home from work. You have to grab something to eat. You have to arrange transportation with the person you're going with. You have to find the tickets. There's all this activity that goes into getting yourself physically from your regular world into a world that's defined by music. And the fact that now you can just click on things and be there instantaneously really changes the engagement level. And you and I spoke about that quite a lot. You know, for me, one of my happiest times are spent in the lobbies of concerts, in lobbies of concert halls right before concerts. And that electricity as people come together is something that we'll have to find a way to harness, you know, in this new technological realm.
But I think it's wonderful to acknowledge it because and we've had many of these conversations that audiences contribute to concerts much more than people think. They're not just passive observers. There is a chemistry and an affect that comes from a group of people that unite in one purpose that is palpable. And so that, to me, and I've said this for years to music writers, that's something that they should write about. And really, and I hate to use daytime television language, but to empower people that they have a huge contribution at the event. Right. So I think now the absence of it makes us really realize that more than ever.
Yeah, there's almost this trust. When I used to be a performer, you know, you might be nervous backstage, but when you walk on stage and there's applause, it changes the dynamic. And the applause, to me, communicates a trust on the part of the audience. And when you bow, you accept that trust, and then you enter into this performance experience together. So when you were recording your videos for Bach at Home, and I think there are 5, and we'll start talking about the music in a second. I believe there are 4.
I guess 4, because the two duets are one video, yeah.
So here you were playing in your living room where you usually practice. How did you mentally conjure up the audience, if you will? Because the performances are spectacular, Pedja. They're so great and so inventive. And did you imagine that we were there?
No, it was all about me. No. You know, it's interesting. I didn't, because I couldn't. You know, it's a funny thing when you play, and I think you will understand that on the one hand, you are aware of people, but when you actually start playing, you just play. Yeah. In other words, you were just focused on. So it's a funny combination of things. So I didn't think in those terms, and this was also different than the first. The first one was just one take of an hour-long program, and these were separate entities. So in that sense, that was slightly different. You know, it was really more about kind of storytelling through music, which is something that interests me in general. So I was trying to figure out, like, how are there these stories different from 3 different people, from Johann Sebastian and Wilhelm Friedman? When do they look back? When do they look ahead? And then this amazing thing that I'm sort of obsessed with: who knew what when? Like, we are at this time, well, we think, you know, 100 years from now, people will say, oh my God, they use internet. Poor things. But, you know, we think like, well, you just go to the computer and you find out anything. That was obviously not the case in 18th century. So how many Handel operas did Bach know? How many Scarlatti sonatas did? And then of course you get to Carl Philipp, and like the sonata I play was published in 1785. That's very much in Mozart's time.
Right.
So did he know? Because music was not that easily available. And Mozart was famously stingy, playing first on himself and then publishing much later to make money again, because it was a commercial enterprise. And so that I'm always obsessed with, like, who knew what and how did that influence them?
Well, I think probably this would be a time to talk about the Wilhelm Friedman piece, because it's so unusual. I listened to it. I listened to your performance again this afternoon, and I'm just astonished at the number of ideas that are there, and to think of what he might have known based on the number of styles across those 14 minutes. He knew a lot, and he sort of put it all in one place in a sense, right?
It's so fascinating. And this is not a horrible generalization to say, maybe that's why he was so unhappy, and he was very unhappy. He could never find a job. The piece is a mess. I mean, I forget now the count, but there's 17 sections in a 14-minute piece. And he abandoned these ideas. Some of them are spectacular. Like somebody who's as stingy and as economical as Beethoven would have written 9 symphonies out of that material.
Right.
Because Beethoven would take one thing and then tweak it in every possible way. Friedman, sometimes Mozart does just throws it away. When he does one thing, something else. So to me, that to me was like a stream of consciousness novel, where he just goes like from one room to another and say, oh, okay, oh, what's there? Oh, look there. Oh. And I never get tired of that piece simply because of that, because it's so narrative, and narrative is something that interests me in music, because he really goes on a limb. But yes, there are parts that are entirely sound like his father, and there are fugues that are kind of formal. But then in some ways, it makes me think of Schumann in this sort of where he just goes in stream of consciousness, not in language, but in a way of composing. We're completely free of any form, but truly free of any form. So it's quite fascinating.
So when you think of what they knew and when they knew it, they certainly, these two brothers, knew their father's music, and I assume they knew each other's music. But do we know very much about the family dynamic between children and famous but old-fashioned father? Certainly CPE and WF were like looking to the next generation and not really, they're looking to go past their father.
Yeah, it was not warm and fuzzy with them, but also you have to also remember that the communication was hugely challenged. They didn't live in the same city. That means that they may have or not have seen each other. And I mean, did they ever see their London brother? I don't know. Maybe they never did. I mean, people didn't hop around. And, shockingly, Zoom was not around.
Never heard
So,
of it.
I mean, who knows? I have no idea whether they communicated. I don't know. I know that Wilhelm Friedman was quite unhappy and he was drunk, which is, not a bad thing at 6:30. But, he was, he could not find his place. So, yeah.
And so we know that that Bach himself was very involved, concerned, dedicated to music education of his family, and as a result, his music and his music education works really have been used for centuries. I mean, your own music education was steeped in the music of Bach.
Yeah, I mean, we do the starts with, the little preludes, which are from these collections from Anna Magdalena Bach, was one of his second wife. And they were really a music business. I mean, both wives and the children, as soon as they somewhat grew up, copied music, which is why it's very interesting. In Johann Sebastian Bach's case, we have very, very few manuscripts because they were all copied by the family. So most of what we have, the most original we have, are copies of sons or wives. which are pretty reliable. But it's an interesting thing. I don't know any other example of that. I mean, they were really a machinery. And of course, he was employed writing cantatas for a lot of his life. So all of this other stuff he did either for himself or to put himself on the map in a different way. And so, yeah, he wrote for his children for education, these little preludes, and then, of course, 2-part inventions, 3-part inventions. And then I think he got kind of appetite to put himself kind of commercially on the map and published these 4 volumes of keyboard exercise. But these are not, I mean, these are, you know, advanced pieces. But it is a really interesting subject how he, because there were no other notebooks to use.
Well, one of the pieces that you record for this is from one of these educational notebooks. It's the Bist du bei mir. And if we're going to talk about a Bach family album, the connection of this music to Bach's family is not exactly because Bach wrote it, right?
Yeah, he, as I said in my intro, he does the cover, as in the pop music term. He took somebody else's piece, but appropriation of that sort was, you know, I mean, the Marcello Oboe Concerto, which I've played on keyboard many times. I mean, Bach doesn't claim that, he says it's Marcello, but they had no qualms. Things traveled very easily. So I think it was a different attitude. It was literally like he did a cover. He did a cover of a song. And so, yeah, there's this beautiful, very simple aria that, well, happily, I gotta give you credit, of course. It was Jim who asked me to do it because I had forgotten, because I'm somewhat older and more senile than Jim. So, Jim reminded me that our dear friend and mentor, Albert Fuller, used to play it. And he said, would you do it? And of course, I was thrilled to kind of revisit it. But as I said to Jim, I could not and did not want to listen to Albert's recording because it would have been too much both pressure and I was just like, I need to I need to do it on my own. So
and in fact, I gave you the handwritten arrangement that Albert did of this particular piece, and you play it so beautifully. And you know, Amanda Forsythe also sings it as part of Bach at Home this year. So, you know, speaking of Albert Fuller, you write in one of the essays as part of the festival, this incredible grand scene of you entering into Albert Fuller's apartment one evening. And maybe you can share that with everyone if they haven't had a chance yet to hear.
Yeah, well, I do encourage you to go because you'll get the musical example to fully understand the impact of it. So Albert lived in one of these early 20th century duplexes that were built for visual artists on West 67th Street between Central Park West and Columbus. And so he had a double height living room, and I was coming to pick him up for dinner, and we were going to have a drink at what he called his positive bar. Mm-hmm. And so when I arrived, the doorman said, oh, there's a note for you at the door. The note just said, you know, I'm upstairs taking a shower. The door is open. Just come in. And there was a vestibule. So there were 2 doors to open. So I opened the first door. And the moment I opened the second door, the music came out blaring from all the speaker of this sort of triumphant movement from the B minor Mass of Bach at Resurrexit, and he will resurrect appropriately. And there was like trumpets blaring, and I just stood at the door like paralyzed. It was an amazing memory.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, you know, as you and I both have moved through our careers, we've often talked about the things that we learned from Albert, which very much were around concert format, and especially how it impacted audience members and their openness, their relative openness to hearing whatever the music was that was going to be played.
And also, Albert, the other thing that I know both you and I believe in, that there's a personal relationship with audience. This is not, you know, number right. 74. There's a real investment, and it's a two-way street, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you have been, I mean, you always are running around the city, hearing, seeing performances. You're one of the most prolific ticket buyers I know. And so during this time, how are you scratching that itch? What have you seen aside from Bach at Home, which I know you recommend, but what have you seen that maybe we can, that you can recommend to us as a room full of very interested, curious concert goers?
So I do have something to recommend, and
Good.
I have a slight involvement in it. So in a weird set of circumstances, I sit on the advisory board of the Pina Bausch Foundation, and it's my life mantra to walk through any door that opens. So somehow I ended up there. So Pina Bausch choreographed Stravinsky's Rite of Spring as one of her early pieces. And there was this project through a dance school in Senegal in Africa that, and I should preface by saying that Pina Bausch very famously did not let her work be danced by other companies except for a couple of works that were kind of co-commissioned because she had a company. And so there's a very kind of proprietary way with, which is also very interesting for us from the music perspective, where we just go out and buy a score and we just play something that doesn't really work in dance. So there was this interesting project where they wanted dancers from Africa to learn this work, and they were auditions. There were, I think, about 400 or 500 dancers applied. Some traveled by bus for like 4 or 5 days. And this project went on for months, and in which they selected 27 dancers. They learned this piece, and these were great modern dancers. Some of them had worked in Europe, but came back to Africa. And it was supposed to be then performed, this tour. There was a tour scheduled to Wuppertal, where the Pina Bausch dance company is, and then Sadler's Wells in London and Théâtre de la Ville in Paris. It was supposed to happen in April. It was canceled. On the day when it was canceled, they filmed a dress rehearsal on the beach. And it's currently available at Sadler's Wells website. It's like $6 or something. Treat yourself. It's amazing.
That's great. It's such a well, tell us about it. Like what makes it so?
Well, there's no light, obviously. And, this is also something to do, I think, also performance, and back to what we as an audience bring, because it's like, so I was in an earlier presentation about something else today, and it was about a hall, and I said how we first hear with our eyes. Mm-hmm. So there's this science of acoustics. First of all, it's famously not precise. But also these are such personal reactions to sounds, because we first see things and we have a certain feeling about the place. We feel warm and fuzzy, or we don't. And so we have an impression before we, conscious or subconscious. So it's the same here. I don't know if it's because I know that they were just told there'll be no tour. Right. So you see certain fervor and you would see it anyway, because these are people who, traveled for 4 or 5 days on a bus to audition for these roles. And this was a paid job. They were going to go to Europe. I mean, it was really, it's quite remarkable.
Well, we'll try and find the Sadler's Wells website and get that up on the.
Yeah. It's just the first thing when you go. It's right there.
Good. So for you now, and we'll open up for questions after this question. But so for you, your schedule is so varied throughout the year, whether it be traveling, local recitals, collaborations, various things. There's been a great deal of dislocation for artists. And so what do you have coming up? And what is the next 3 months, 6 months? What does the next year look like for you?
Well, first of all, it's, you mentioned that I have these other hats. So I'm artistic administrator at Baryshnikov Art Center. So we have a bunch of online programming that's coming up that's, taking a long time, because this is such uncharted territory for all of us. And so, if in the past you would just walk on stage and do a performance, we know how to put on a show. But how do you put on a show online? It's like 7 people brushing your teeth. So, it's very complicated. But again, maybe it's my personality, but I just feel like it's so fascinating, because you have to look at every aspect with a really clarity and really make a decision. And then, and it's the same at Tippett Rise Art Center in Montana, which is a summer season, which we canceled. And as Peter and Kathy Hall said, who are the founders, and I keep joking that canceling a season is much more work than having it. So we have, just like you have with the Bach, did a lot of initiative of online engagement, of webcasting from previous seasons, and partnerships with other organizations, and that's also been incredibly fascinating. But I feel like I'm working more than ever. Mm-hmm. But it's, as far as I have one more film to make for Maverick Concerts, with a Haydn sonata, a set of cage sonatas and interludes for prepared piano, and a Beethoven sonata opus 7. Mm-hmm. That will be, I think will be aired in early September, but I have to do it in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And but then my first concert that's not canceled is in Vancouver, and then Atlanta Symphony. I'm playing Chopin's Second Piano Concerto, which I haven't played in 30 years, and I really did not want to play it. But it's the last season of Robert Spano in Atlanta, and he asked me, he had heard me play Chopin Preludes, and he said, you're a great Chopin, you should be playing Chopin. I was like, yeah, no. And so he insists. So Chopin Concerto is a very non-flashy piece, but I think it's one of the hardest things to play. First of all, it's relentless. You play the entire time. And so I've been sort of mortified of it, and I've been practicing it often even before. So now at least my schedule's clear. I could just practice. Even, who knows, it might get canceled. But, anyway, that's in January. So basically I'm canceled through New Year. Until January 1st, everything's canceled.
And so are you practicing daily as you would have otherwise, or? Well,
I am now because I still have to film this. So I am. I mean, I've been really busy because when everything got canceled, I had a 92nd Street Y recital schedule, so that had to be filmed. So I've been, mm-hmm. I've had stuff that had a deadline quite, immediate. The question is, like, after this Maverick thing, if I will go on practicing, I don't know. We'll find out.
We will. I'll find something else for you to do for us too. So, Pedja, it's. I feel like we've been having this conversation for 30 years, and it just keeps getting more and more interesting. And it was such a really remarkable concert that you gave for us last year at the Bach Festival in Cary Hall. And I just think that this Bach family album is so fascinating and so beautiful. And thank you so much for being a part of our festival this year.